Hello and welcome to the Elevate Your Running podcast with your hosts, myself, Austin Myers, and my co-host, Sarah Manderscheid. We are here to talk about all things running, life, and today we're going to really get into mental strength and mindset. We're excited because this is one of our favorite topics to discuss. We will be referencing episode 8 of the podcast, which feels like both not long ago, but also a while ago, as we're now on episode 24. But episode 8 was all about strategies for mental strength. We're going to expand on some of those ideas today and provide some new perspectives as well, because it is such a valuable aspect of our training to develop. But before that, we want to kick it off the same way that we do every single week with our elevated moments. Sarah, how are you today? And what is your elevated moment of the week?
Hey, Austin, how are you? It's good to see you and be here with you. I'm doing okay. We're recording this a little bit on the early side, a busy day. We're recording on Tuesday, the 28th. And so it's going to be a really exciting episode. I'm really excited for it, but I'm also pretty tired. So we'll see how it goes.
Understood. But hey,
yeah.
We're mentally strong. We're going to push through it, right?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. My elevated moment ties into the topic of this podcast today. I hosted a running retreat in Boulder that started last Thursday, ran through Sunday. It was about 4 days. Some of the athletes came into town on Wednesday. So it's been a fun-filled, long weekend full of community and connection and elevate athletes. So that was amazing. And our very first session was with Dr. Justin Ross, who is a psychologist. He works primarily with, elite athletes, Major League Baseball, NFL, elite runners. And he came in on Thursday night to kind of kick off the retreat, which was amazing. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into mental strength in a different way than we did in episode 8 and how important it is. So I'm excited for our conversation this morning.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was fun to see that on social media and how you were able to bring on guests to discuss some of these important ideas and important perspectives with the people who were a part of your run retreat. So it was really great to see that you put on such an awesome event. My elevated moment is the race that happened this past weekend, my first ultra marathon. And I think a really good way to segue into this discussion on mental strength, because as we were talking about before the episode, I wasn't necessarily prepared for this race. I haven't been much of a trail runner in recent experiences. I felt that my body was able to run the goal that I had of 50 miles just because of our recent marathon training block. I knew I was in shape. But when you get into miles 30 and 40, I'm sure any person who's run an ultra marathon would tell you that it's mental strength at that point, because things will go wrong. And things did get uncomfortable, discomforts that I hadn't felt in a marathon before. But when you are running for 8, 9, 10 and more hours, those discomforts set in, and you just have to be willing to continue forward and push through those things. So that's my elevated moment this week is achieving my goal of running the 50 miles. It ended up being 52 miles. The course was a little bit longer than I had anticipated, which was fine. It was a 6.5 mile loop that I intended to do 8 times. And I finished in, I believe, about 12 hours, 14 minutes. So it was a really successful first ultra marathon. Might not be something that I do for a little bit, as I have marathons on my radar in the nearer future, but it was an amazing experience and something that I'll continue to pull from. It's one of those wins that I'll pull from in moments that I need that added mental strength. I think that's something we can get into as well with this episode. But before we, get into the weeds of it all, Sarah, I would like for you to kind of kick off, with your understanding, your experience, and a definition of what mental strength is for you and generally for athletes who may be listening to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Mental strength to me is the ability to shift and pivot when unexpected things come up, whether it's in training, whether it's on race day, and being able to effectively flow through maybe added stressors or pressures or challenges or weather or whatever it is, to be able to still perform at the level that you set out to perform at. We all go through mental strength challenges. I found out on Thursday night, we all went around in a circle. We had about 8 or 9 people there, and we all shared what we go through when we're standing at the line before a race. And we all got to hear each other, which was really incredible. I feel like on some level, related to each other. There were many times where people piggybacked off of the other person saying, I also feel that way, and I feel this way. And it was really great. It was a really great bonding experience, actually. And for me to get to know my athletes a little bit on a different level, to understand where they're coming from, because I see them as strong and capable and confident runners. And it's really interesting to see when you maybe pull that away, what they're seeing about themselves and how they feel. So it's a really powerful night. And it's a way that we can all kind of shift into a stronger mindset once we decide, what is really getting in my way? Why do I break down? Right? Mental toughness is the ability to be able to flow through when things get tough, right? So if you're walking after a hard interval set, if you're walking during a race, if you're quote unquote quitting, which I don't really love that word, but maybe you're taking a step back and saying, I can't do this. This is too hard. That's showing that there's a lot of work to be done on the mental side of things. So I'm excited to talk through some tangible things that we can do to show up stronger for race day, and be a stronger community and athlete because of it.
Yeah, I really like a lot of those ideas that you brought up there. And to me, mental strength is the ability to be metacognitive. So like really understanding our thought processes and valuing the fact that details matter. I think, Sarah, as a coach, you especially understand that details matter in our training. The physical details and the workouts that we're doing, the details of those workouts matter in our preparation for a big race.
Yeah.
But as athletes, we really need to value the fact that the details matter of our mindset as well. The things that we are telling ourselves during those moments of struggle, those matter because they're like a loop. They're going to come back around. So the way that you're talking to yourself in a hard workout, or the way that you are talking yourself out the door to go on a training run, maybe at a moment that you don't want to, if you accept a moment of weakness there and you take what could be perceived as a loss by not doing what you told yourself you were going to do, the agreement that you originally made with yourself, if you don't uphold that, ultimately you will not uphold it when, the chips are on the table and you have to perform on race day. So it's just understanding, for me, mental strength is that, how you're going to do it today is how you're ultimately going to do it in the future as well. Understanding that those details matter, and that our ability to think about how we're thinking and think about what's happening in our minds, both consciously and subconsciously, those will potentially impact our performance even more than the physical training. Because, I think there's a lot of stories that we could pull, both from the professional and non-professional side, where maybe the athlete wasn't in the best position to perform, but their mental strength was so strong that they did perform and that they overcame that challenge.
Absolutely. Like, hands down, my race last weekend or 2 weekends ago in Minnesota would have looked very different if I didn't work on my mental strength over the last year. Plus, I had, I know I mentioned this in episode 8, incredible mental strength going into the pandemic, and things had shifted. So I'm really excited over the last year really worked hard on it. It's being self-aware too of when those thoughts are coming into your mind in training and being able to flow through it, because the exact same thing happens on race day, right? How you show up in training is how you show up on race day. And I definitely went into negative self-talk on the course, hands down, but it was being able to be aware of that and shifting out of it as quickly as possible and going into my mantras and leaning into, yes, I listen to music, like leaning into my music. And I specifically picked very strategic songs to listen to, which were more about running fast and feeling strong and powerful. But what it ended up being was leaning into the lyrics to push through and to flow through just a very uncomfortable 90, 91, 92 minutes on the course. So it's being aware, first and foremost, of where your mind is going when you're out there, and practicing it during workouts, practicing it during easy runs, not giving up, not saying, oh, I don't feel like doing this today. I'm going to stop my watch and end the run early and the workout early. And I would even argue skipping runs at the very beginning of every training cycle, or at the very beginning of working with a coach or signing up for a race. You are making a commitment to yourself. You're making a commitment, if you do have a coach, to that coach to show up and to put the work in. And we talked about this on another episode. Like, once you start negotiating with yourself, it's all over, right? So you get to, first and foremost, lace up your shoes, get out the door, get the run in, and be able to flow through the uncomfortable. If training and racing were easy, everyone would do it. And not everyone is a runner. Not everyone is an athlete. Not everyone runs marathons. It's about 1% of the population who actually run marathons. So it's a big commitment, right? So being able to set yourself up for success with being physically capable to run a marathon or to run a half marathon, 10K, 5K, ultra marathon, whatever that is for you. But then also working, I would argue that the mental side is equally as important as the physical side. Studies have shown that, at least for a marathon distance or longer, the mental side is actually more important than the physical side. To be able to push through, because as we all, if you've run a marathon, you know, there's a point on the course, and for all the Elevate athletes, I hope it's after mile 22. That's always my goal, where you have to shift from the physical to the mental side, because it's just really hard at that point. And being able to flow through that for the last 4.2 miles is the key.
Yeah. And I like that you referenced, no matter the distance, right? There's a very small percentage of the population who runs these races, which is funny to hear, because the amount of people that you see at a marathon, especially a major marathon like Chicago, Boston, New York, like there are thousands upon thousands of people, and yet that is still such a small percentage of the population. But it's important for people to understand that for you to achieve something, worth really working towards and pushing through, like, hard is relative. So choose something that's going to get you out of your comfort zone, and embrace the fact that when you're in that moment, whether it be the moment of training for it, or you're in the moment of trying to achieve that goal that you had previously set, embrace the fact that that is out of your comfort zone, that it's not supposed to come easily, and that because it's not coming easily, you are growing from it. That's what was consistently going through my mind in this ultra marathon is, this is what you signed up for. You are uncomfortable. This is the position that you purposely put yourself in, and you're going to embrace that moment, because at the end of the day, I ran for 12 hours. That's half of a day. Like, that's an even smaller percentage of the week. I can endure for that long because what I receive in terms of developing my mental strength, in terms of taking away lessons from my life, what I receive from those 12 hours is much greater. The sacrifice that I invested in those 12 hours is so valuable to my life that it's worth it. It's worth pushing through that discomfort.
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, you get to make the commitment to yourself, right? to do this. And then from there, shift and pivot, flow through the uncomfortable pieces of it. I remember seeing your posts on Saturday night. Like, I think the first loop you fell 2 or 3 times. The
Yeah.
second loop you might have fallen once, and then you got into a flow and you got into a routine, and it would have been really easy to throw the towel in after that first loop, I'm sure, because as everyone knows, I fall all the time, and, or at least it feels like I fall. My chances of falling are greater than most people. It doesn't feel good. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it makes you feel a lot of different emotions. So I'm really proud of you for flowing through that and having, having fun with it too. That's the other side of all of this is we don't need to be so serious about
Yeah.
training and racing and, being laser focused on the goal. Like, we still get to smile. Studies have shown if you smile while racing, you will run faster. We still get to have fun. We still get to lean into our bodies and running paces that just feel really good for us versus getting stuck in on what our watch is showing us or what our friends are running on Strava or how fast certain people are running versus how much slower we feel like we are. We get to have fun with this because at the end of the day, like everyone knows, if we're not having fun, what are we doing? We get to have fun, but we also get to work on our mental side as well.
Yeah, that was really my rationale for signing up for this race and going out there to run 50 miles was two things I told everybody. I said, I'm not prepared for this, to the highest level that I could be, certainly not to the level that I was prepared for the Buffalo Marathon a month ago. But my rationale was I signed up out of sheer fun. I wanted to have fun out
Mm,
there, and I did.
yeah.
Even in the moments where it was hard, I had fun because I recognized that I chose it. And the other reason was I wanted to see how I reacted when things got hard. I wanted to endure through those tough moments. And an important lesson that I take away from those 8 loops on the 6.5 mile course is that something will always present itself that needs to be overcome. So, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, the first loop, the first 2 loops, what I had to figure out was how do I stay upright? I was falling far too often, primarily because I'm so used to road running that it's just a different stride. And when you're trying to look out for roots and stumps and things in the ground, you have to be aware of that. And it was a little demoralizing to fall 3 times on the first loop because it was still daylight out. Like that was a very small percentage of the race where I could see without the assistance of my headlamp, and I was still
Yeah.
falling. So that was
Yeah.
frustrating, but I overcame it. I adjusted, and I knew that I could. So ultimately, I went through, man, the 4 or 5 loops that followed that, and I didn't fall at all. Now I almost fell, but I caught myself. But it's an adjustment. But guess what? When I stopped falling, then other things started to get challenging. I got nauseous. I had stomach issues. I had to adjust fueling. Like all of these things, there was a
Yeah.
constant challenge in my face. But every time that I face something, I recognize that I chose this. I put myself in this position intentionally. And what I do in this moment is going to affect how I live my life when I'm outside of this moment as well. And that's really where I see the value of these physical pursuits that we have is that if we don't embrace all that it does for us mentally, just as much as it does for us physically, then we are not truly getting as much out of it as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's important to note that we all go through this. We all have our thing that's holding us back and we all get to flow through it and show up and also knowing your body, right? And knowing when it is time to pull the plug or it is time to DNF in a race or it is time to say not today. I think and know stress is stress and I've been through that before. I've had athletes going through it now where there's so much going on outside of running that I actually don't want them pushing through really challenging things in training, because I feel like the balance there really isn't a balance there. So it's really knowing yourself and being in tune with yourself, in tune with your body. It's probably one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself as an athlete, is knowing how you're showing up, when enough is enough, and also when to continue to flow forward and continue to do it. In Duluth, I had that breaking point of, it was mile 5, and I wanted, I think I hit 6:49 pace. It should have felt easy, and it felt so foreign to me, and it felt like I was running a 6-minute mile, that it made me realign and reevaluate and say, okay, so this pace definitely isn't happening for the next 8 miles. But finding a pace that was still comfortably hard, that I was still fighting for every second, to feel like I gave everything I had on the course, which is one of the very few races I've had that experience in. I know a lot of people who ran Chicago last fall. That's another race where it's that fine line of, you're showing up, it's 75 degrees, it's 80% humidity, the dew point is really high, the sun is out. You're running around tall buildings, which is creating an even warmer environment on the course. And knowing what your body is capable of while keeping yourself safe, and not, being admitted to the hospital or getting put into a med tent. Like, no one wants that. So it's finding that grace and finding that balance within yourself. So something we did in the running retreat on the very last morning was a prediction run. So what I wanted to do was set up this retreat where we talked about the mental strength first, and how to flow through it, to know that we're all going through it together, and to also lean into your body. So we talked a lot about running for joy and running naked, which means not wearing a smartwatch, and being really in tune with your body, and forgetting about the metrics and the expectations that we put on ourselves. So the way that we ended the retreat was with a prediction run, which meant all the phones, all the smartwatches, got to stay at the house. And we went into this run. I gave them the distance, I gave them the terrain, and they all got to give me a time that they thought they could run in this distance. And it didn't matter if they wanted to sprint. It didn't matter if they wanted to do a comfortably hard, or if they wanted to take it easy. The whole point was to see, with the intention of this run, how well do they know their body going into it? And how close can you get to the time that you gave me? So my invitation to everyone listening is to do this, because it's really fun. It's a really great way to know how aligned you are with yourself and with your paces and the feelings that you get while you run. What's really cool is that the girl that ran, or that won this year, she also won last year. She's very in tune to her pace and what she knows she's capable of with whatever pace she's going out to do. So I think that's really cool. And it's something I do, it's something I practice. And the more you run, the longer you run. I've been running for over 15 years, probably close to 16 years now. The easier that is. But my invitation to you is to definitely go out and do it. And then just take note of the time. If any of my athletes are listening, we can, one, build this into your plan, or two, if you just want to go out and do it, don't wear your watch, but just let me know I ran, 3.5 miles or 5 or whatever it is in this amount of time. And it'll be a really good conversation to have, and what we get to do to build on that. So you are aligned with your body, you are in sync with your body, because the more you can get into that side of things, when it gets tough, it's a little bit easier to flow through it.
Yeah, that really speaks to the importance of just perspective, and the perspective that we have truly manifests itself as reality. Because, very, very few times do we go out on a run and actually have the goal of giving 100% of ourselves, right? Even a threshold run. A threshold run is not 100% effort.
Right.
So that is a very, small piece to the puzzle of this training that we're doing, no matter the distance that we're training for. So understanding that I'm going out on this run, you have to understand what the standard is. What are you supposed to do as the athlete physically? But then also diving into, okay, I'm not giving 100% of myself physically. How do I now invest in the mental side of things as well? I think looking at running form and technique is a great way to invest mentally into some of these training runs where we're running a pace, Sarah, like you mentioned, it's comfortably uncomfortable, right? Like I'm not necessarily comfortable running at this pace, but I can certainly maintain it. And for many
Yeah.
of us, that is about where our marathon pace is. So when you're out on those training runs, training for a race, find that and invest in the mental side of things, because you're leaving a little bit out on the table physically. That's part of the goal. But mentally, how can you invest so that when you're out there on race day and you have to string those miles together for 13 to 26 miles, how do you then have the composure to do that and understand that you are prepared for that as well?
Absolutely. I would say if marathon pace is feeling comfortably uncomfortable during training, it's probably too fast. Is it going to get like that at some point during the race? Absolutely. But I'm hoping it's in the last 10K or fewer miles. In training, marathon should feel like a 5 out of 10. It should feel pretty easy, a little bit a little bit harder than easy pace. Threshold, tempo pace, something that you're holding for, up to 60 minutes, more so around maybe 45 minutes with threshold work. We kind of work our way into that. Same with tempo, but it should feel like that 7 out of 10 on a rate of perceived effort, like uncomfortably hard. You can still hold your pace, but maybe you're struggling to put a full sentence together if you're running with someone. Those workouts are really great workouts to work through, flowing through when it doesn't feel good. But I would also say I have athletes who don't feel good on easy days either. And sometimes that's because of lack of sleep or the summertime temperatures or dehydration or a poor diet. And so it's flowing through even the uncomfortable parts of an easier run. So we all show up differently, but we all show up the same is one of my takeaways from talking to Justin over the running retreat.
Yeah, and that understanding is really important, because a lot of the times, if you're in a training block, or maybe life stress is just really high and you don't want to sacrifice your running, so you're still getting out there to run, you're gonna feel pretty worn down. You're gonna feel tired, and
Yeah,
you might, as you were mentioning with the whole idea of running without a watch, you may be looking at your mile splits and you're like, why is this 30 seconds slower than I'm used to, and I feel awful. But going back to metacognition and just understanding your thought processes, understand
yeah,
also why your body may be giving you certain signals, and scaling to what is appropriate for that day, and understanding that a win or getting 1% better every day looks different each new day that you have.
absolutely. It can look different. It should look different. And how many times have we looked down at our watch and it doesn't feel good? And we see a pace that's either maybe slower than we think that we're running, or on the flip side, it's quite a bit faster than we think we're capable of. How many times do we create a story in that instance and then we shift and get back into what feels quote unquote comfortable and we don't actually flow through it? So, my invitation to everyone listening today is to take some time this week when you're running to be aware of when your mind starts to shift into that negative self-talk, and then what you're doing to flow through it to get back onto the positive side of things. I've had athletes and friends tell me before that it's like hearing my voice in their mind, being able to push through it. I had a friend who was hiking in Patagonia earlier this year, and she um, injured her knee. She didn't tear anything, but I think she sprained her MCL or something. So she was in a lot of pain. And she said it was my voice through her head that was getting her. She completed the hiking trip, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. But she's like, I traveled over 24 hours to get here. I'm doing this. And whether it's channeling your coach, channeling Austin, channeling someone that is close to you, someone who inspires and motivates you, and maybe it's your own voice, like being able to really lean into that. Something else that I felt was a really great tool to have is an example that Dr. Justin Ross gave us on Thursday night, and it's a tangible exercise. So my invitation to you is to get go out to the store if you don't have this already and buy just, you know, a lot of paper clips, and buy some paper clips. I'm choosing to buy some really fun pink paper clips because I feel like that's going to create a really fun activity around this. And every time you go out for a training run and work on your mental toughness, and that could be 60 seconds, it could be 30 seconds, it could be 5 minutes. Anytime you see yourself shifting back into the positive and flowing through it, or anytime that you have that self-awareness, you string a paperclip together. And you do this over the course of an entire training cycle. So if you're running 5 to 6 days a week for 4 months, that's going to be a really long paperclip chain. And the invitation to you is during taper. That's a tangible thing that you get to reference to say, maybe you're having imposter syndrome and you feel like maybe you're not going to be showing up as strong as you think you are on race day, but that paperclip chain is going to show you that you have put the work in both physically and mentally. And Justin's recommendation was to actually take this paperclip chain to the start line of the race and take 5 to 6 minutes to meditate on it. And we can talk about that in another episode, and the benefits of meditating for a few minutes before the start of a race, which studies have shown will produce better results. Meditating on that. And then his invitation was to throw the the paperclip chain away. I asked if I could use it as a necklace and wear it like around my neck for the race. You can do whatever you want to do. His thought was like you meditate on it and then you throw it away, like you are strong and powerful and you don't need this reminder, this physical or tangible reminder anymore, and that you are owning it. So I think that's really powerful, and it's something I'm going to be doing leading up through Chicago training. And I have some other things that are shifting and pivoting this summer. So I am showing up not just mentally strong, but physically strong and having a really great summer of training.
Yeah, I really love that piece of tangible evidence there, because we have to make it tangible, right? Like we have to apply these principles. Talking is not enough. And my piece of advice would be this: is, oftentimes in communication with others, the tip is to listen before you speak, right? You want to listen to what the other person is saying before you reply or before you say what you want to say. And I think that that's also true in terms of how we handle the discussion going on in our minds. When things get hard, especially in training, like really practice this in a training run before a big event, in the months preceding a big event. Listen to the place that your mind goes initially when things get hard. Listen to the story that it tries to create, because oftentimes it's going to create a story that places you in the position of a victim. It is somehow saying that because you're in this situation, you cannot or should not overcome the circumstance. But once you've listened to it and you've been able to kind of understand that thought process, because it probably will repeat itself every single time that things get hard, you start to see that routine that your mind creates. And now it's your turn to speak. So begin to create your own mentality that is not rooted in being a victim, but rather you are placing yourself in the position of the hero. Not reasons for why you can't overcome, but reasons that you will overcome. Things that you are going to now do to take action and to conquer the challenge that's in front of you. That's what you're able to do but I believe that it is extremely important to first understand that there is a default setting that your mind is going to find itself in when things get hard, and you can take control of that. You can create a new script, a new story for your mind, and you can hardwire that in to where when you're on race day, you're pulling from those moments of strength that you have ultimately practiced throughout and the weeks and the months that preceded that race. And when you're able to do that, and when you're able to show up for yourself time after time after time, it becomes a hardwired setting. And really, that's one thing that we were discussing before the podcast, Sarah, is as everyday athletes who may look at elite athletes in any field, and it doesn't even have to be athletics. We look at people who are elite in their field and they are succeeding at an extremely high level. From the outsider's perspective, it looks like it comes easily to them. But the reality is that they have just developed such a high level of mental strength that you're not seeing the little things that they are working through every single day, because they've become so accustomed to conquering those weaknesses of the mind. We can do that as well, but it takes intentional practice. It takes that metacognitive ability to be able to understand what your mind is saying and to be able to rewrite the script for yourself.
Absolutely. Be the hero. Doesn't that just sound good? Is anyone smiling right now listening to that? Like, be the hero, and it can be small steps each day, each training run to get yourself there. Studies have shown that elite runners have a greater tolerance for pain too, so they can shift into that. But we all show up the same, right? We all go through the same thing. So know that you're not alone. Know that we all struggle with, the victim mentality or the negative mindset or the stories we create about why we can't do something, and that we all get to shift into being heroes this year and running our strongest races and showing up to be in our training cycles as committed, strong athletes, and in life with whatever we're doing, whatever our goals are for the year, with work, with family, with personal endeavors or personal goals. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. I love it. And that's really our encouragement for everybody is focus on the mental side just as much as the physical, if not more, because it will pay amazing dividends in your future, not just physically, not just on race day, but in all areas of your life. You'll start to see how you are overcoming challenges in every aspect of your life, and you will be a stronger person for it. It is always a worthy investment to invest within.
Definitely.
So we thank you for listening to this episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast, and we hope that you will not only join us again, but connect with us outside of this podcast. You can connect with me on Instagram at Austin Myers Fitness. And Sarah, where can they connect with you and the Elevate Your Running community?
Absolutely. Instagram and Twitter at Sarah, SAYRAH runs happy, and at Elevate Your Running. Thank you everyone for listening. We hope you loved this conversation. Please give us feedback on what you're doing to work on your mental strength, both on and off the roads and trails. And we'll see you next week. Have a great week. Happy 4th of July next Monday, all the good things.
Thank you, everybody.